We're at what, 6:29?
Yes.
And you're picking up me on the mic, I'll just speak loud. Okay, I'm going to call to order the planning and zoning meeting for the town of Salisbury, Tuesday, November 18, 2014. The first item of business will be the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, subtractions, deletions to be made to the agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have all 5
Yes.
commission members here this evening, as well as all 3 of our alternates. Very good. We we did receive an additional piece of correspondence from Laser Building Company, which was on the CEO's desk, which I have a copy of. We can pass it down. We don't have additional copies, do we, Nancy?
No, I did not.
Why don't we just pass it around so the members of the commission can familiarize themselves with it. The first order of business is the election of officers. I wasn't sure I was going to make it here tonight, but I am here. And I circulated a slate. That is one slate. That was a slate with myself as chair. Vice Chairman Schmidt has requested the next year that for personal reasons he cannot fulfill the duties of vice chair. Commissioner Higgins has graciously volunteered to serve as vice chair, and Commissioner Whalen once again has offered to serve as secretary. So that is the slate that is before you. That doesn't mean that there can be other slates introduced.
Motion to move the slate. Second.
Any discussion? And as you know, it's a slate. The individual people that are on the slate can also vote. So all those in favor of the slate as proposed, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, I believe that's anybody opposed. Very good. Okay.
Congratulations.
I don't know if it's congratulations or condolences. I'll hold judgment on that. Okay, we have a proposed meeting scheduled for the forthcoming year. This year we sort of know that we always have the issue of is it attached to the packet?
No, it isn't.
It's not attached to the packet?
No. You and I discussed it, but I didn't attach it.
Well, do we have to basically it's the first and third Tuesdays, but we did make two changes.
One would be election day in November, so it's that Wednesday, and the other is the school board.
So we actually thought ahead this time, rather than scheduling it on those days, we now scheduled it for the Wednesday after the election.
And I will forward that schedule to you.
And it's at 6:30. We're going to continue it's on the table, but continuing our practice for meeting at 6:30.
The public hearings at 6:45.
The public hearings at 6:45. Is any member of the commission or the alternates for that matter would like to do an alternative schedule or meeting time?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Sounds fine. Everyone happy with that? Okay. Do we need to, I guess we should, someone might like to make a motion, please, to approve that?
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Very good. Thank you. Okay, the minutes of October 21st, 2014. I'll start to my right. Commissioner Whalen, do you have any additions or corrections? No. Commissioner Higgins?
I thought they were well done. I just have one minor one, and I'm not sure if it's important or not, but on page 2, line 15, we were talking about the RV zone and some are partially in the RV zone and partially not. I was going to replace not with RR1. So some are in the RE zone and partially the RR1 zone.
Right. Is there anything that's other than the R1? No, okay, that's fine then. That's cool.
I think it's just a little clearer.
Yeah, that's clear.
Not,
Yeah,
partially not.
partially the R1.
That was my only suggestion.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Page 2, line 23. Schmidt raised the issue of regulation 215, revising. I would like to insert revising regulation 215 concerning short-term events town-wide, as opposed to just in the RE zone. Just what was the discussion was. Other than that, it's fine to me.
Commissioner Cochran.
I just had a question on page 2, line 5. It says in a process such as special permit. And I'm wondering, do we need to include or site plan review? What was from site plan review one of the selections on the list? I can't remember. Or was it just covered by such as?
You know, you could actually quite easily, but I wasn't at the meeting, but you could easily just strike that clause such as the special permit process.
Then the process can be
Then
stopped.
the process can be established.
To be established, all
Right.
right.
That leaves yourself the latitude for both.
Okay, so
If that's agreeable to all.
get out of the specifics and.
Yep.
All right, that's good.
Acceptable to everyone? Commissioner Shire?
I was not present.
Mr. Schiffer?
I think Derek wrote it perfectly.
Commissioner Flynn?
Fine.
Fine, okay, then I'll entertain a motion for approval. So moved. And a second?
Second.
Okay, and all those in favor?
Aye.
And I will abstain because I was not there. Okay,
Just to note, it's the minutes of 11:05 instead of 10.
Oh,
yeah.
It's the minutes for 11:05.
On the agenda.
oh, sorry.
Yeah,
oh,
that's
Yeah.
got
need
it.
to amend the agenda, that's right.
Yep.
Have the minutes of October 21st already been taken care of, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move to the CEO report, item number 6, please. Nancy?
Anyone have any questions?
Notice-
Office is much busier now that I'm doing.
But Nancy has been providing the monthly reports as we have requested. Now I'm going to ask for any public comments on items that are neither on the agenda nor the subject of any planning commission action, past action or contemplated action. Any public comments that fit that rubric? Seeing none, we're going to move to old business. And the first item is a request from the CEO to release the bond in the amount of $75,000 for the property owned by Quality Properties LLC, located at 185 Sheridan Road. And maybe you could quickly update us on that, Nancy?
The one condition of approving that special permit was that all the seeding and the soil be done, reclaimed or reseeded, set in, by October 31st. That has been done. It's all, and it's coming in nicely. If anybody has been by it to see it, it really took really, really well. I do believe at some point there may be a barrier on the bottom to prohibit anybody from going in this winter. But other than that, yearly reports are to be made, you know, to make the status of everything.
So it's your recommendation?
It's my recommendation that it be released.
Because they've done what they're supposed to
They
do.
have,
The bond isn't being held for any of the monitoring, it's just doing help for that.
specifically for that.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to release the bond, please, as requested by the CEO.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Is there any further discussion on this matter? Okay. Those in favor of it signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Very good. You can go ahead and release that bond.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item under old business is the site plan for the property located at 146 Millerton Road in Lakeville. We have received correspondence, which we have seen from Gerald Reidy. We have received correspondence from the Lake Association, from Mr. Littauer. We have received this evening correspondence that has made its way around the table. If it's not, I'd like to get it down to the other end of the table. Do you have extra copies of Mr. Lasers? Right, excellent. Let's just pass those around so everyone has it. I'd like to get the file, the official file copy back down to Nancy. We need more down there. Oh, could you give that to me? Okay, we have the file copy back. You have in your own copies. We got that. We got back to the file.
Anybody need another one?
Do you have an extra one? Does everyone have it? Does everyone have a copy of Mr.?
I just read it, so I know.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So I guess this request was made by Gerald Reidy, so I believe that Mr. Reidy should at least begin his discussion. Sir, will you please just come up and sit up in the chair there and get the microphone so Mr. Reidy.
Nancy, you told me that I was to sit with him?
Is Mr. Reidy, is Mary Silks part of your presentation?
Yeah, sure.
Then come on up and it's part of the presentation. Mary. Grab another chair, please. As I said before, we're going to keep very tightly focused on this particular issue and not on the larger global issues, because I think we have to sort of...
I'm not too sure what the vote is, but let me start off, first of all.
Let me tell you what the global issues are, all the other problems that are on the lake with development. I want to keep focused, Mr. Reidy, on the specifics of your application.
Okay.
Not your application,
Right.
your neighbor's application this evening.
Right, okay. Well, I received a note in October, an email from Mr. Lasco, is it? Laser, I'm sorry. Saying that he had removed the trees, which is the first time I even heard of anything going on at the property. I was never notified of any. I never received any certified mail. I never received anything. Although Dean had my email address. This was the first I heard about it, so I went up and...
You never received the card isn't provided property owner?
You wouldn't for site plan, this is not a
Site plan,
permit.
that's right, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, they stuck it in some Waterbury paper, but he had an email that goes on to send it to me. But in any event, I'd like to show you the trees. First of all, there were about 40 trees removed when I got up there. It was just, it's like a moonscape. The trees are shown here. It's a majestic line of spruce, Norwegian spruce, about 40 of them.
These are the same pictures, 2 copies of the same?
Yes.
Showing us?
Yes.
May we keep these?
Yes, you may.
Make sure Nancy label one of those, reading one.
And here's 4 copies of the one. This is an overhead shot. And this is the line of trees going down.
Mr. Reidy, just for the record, the spruce are the ones here. This
Yes.
is what you're referring to.
Right.
Is this your property? This belongs?
No, it's on the property line on their property.
This here is your property?
Yes, that's my
Thank you,
property.
sir. Okay.
And the trees extend over onto my property.
Now,
Now we're looking at, if you look at coming down here, this is an overhead map from Zillow, I guess. It shows the line of trees going down to the water. All those trees were removed.
Same as
that's the
that?
same. You have
Yes,
that's
it's an aerial view.
Number 2. You can go
at the meeting here at the Planning and Zoning in September, when they submitted a picture of the existing garage, although not identified as such, but you can see the pictures of the trees in the background. And then,
Now, this is from the application that was submitted?
yes,
Okay.
and those are the trees in the background, but not identified as such. Now, I went on MLS just to give you some further perspective. This is a view from the lake, looking up, and the trees are here, marching that up from the lake.
This blue shed, is that on your property?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's, make that, I guess, just keep noting. Is there only one of these you have?
Oh, I may have some others.
That's okay, this one labeled, we'll have one copy for the file.
Here it is. There's probably a better file copy. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just long as you have one that's marked.
And then this is another one that shows the existing white fence down near the water and then going upwards and the trees.
Well, that's from the MLS, okay, that's why there's interior shots.
Now, this is a picture from MLS of the 146 property site. And if you look here, this is a picture from 146 looking to the lake. And if you look at the right, those are the trees on the right. And this is another one from the same thing. And in this case, as you look at it, it's on the right. The same thing from the porch.
Okay, so we have seven different, we have seven, I think we've got
Right.
7 things into the record.
And I don't know if I've already shown you, this is, when you look, the trees are here also from their side.
Yeah, we've seen that one.
Okay, yeah, all right.
I think so.
I got so many pictures here,
Yeah, okay, well, I think we
Okay.
can get the picture. I think we get a picture. Yes, sir.
Okay, so let me show you. So I first got into this when I came up, and I was shocked to see they were all gone. So I went in at the town hall and got the site plan and the survey map, and I noticed a number of discrepancies in the survey map and in the site plan. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because I think the survey, I think the application was not accurate. And I think that the basis on which the approval was given was erroneous in that it did not exist. And I think there are a number of violations in the plan that I want to bring to your attention.
When you say violations, can you elaborate?
Violations of the planning and zoning code.
Of our code?
Yes. Also the violation of the state code.
Okay.
Now, to do this, I have to go back a little bit first of all. This is a
I have,
This is a map prepared in February 2009 for Dean Halbert by Matt Kiefer.
Was this part of the submission for this application?
No, it wasn't. But I have to show you how the submission does not reflect the title record. The boundary on the submission is incorrect.
The
The
property line?
property line on the application is incorrect. So, this is prepared after the litigation that Mr. Halbert went through, and he bought the place next door. He then subdivided, or he did a boundary movement, and he bought this as Nutshell. He's the owner of Nutshell. He's 100% Nutshell, and this is himself here. This part was part of this 146, but he moved it to 144 so we would have more acreage, so he would be conforming.
So we did a lot line adjustment, is that?
Yeah. And he reduced this by a third, increased this by half.
Both the lots are conforming.
Yes, well, they're conforming for the property line, because if you notice here, this bump out, this was to make this house conforming on the side here. So what he did was, he changed this here, and he made this conforming here. See that? Want to pass that around? You can,
And that's from this date, 2009, they did that?
yes. And then in April, May 2009, he decided to change it again. And what he did here was, if you recall from the earlier one, this was this part here. Upside down here. Oh yeah. This part here was circular. He squared it off. And you'll see that the land area there was 1.076, but because he got more here, it went to 1.077. But this part is still the bump out. And if you see this part from here to here, he made it conforming because it was 25.5 feet from the side. Now, when you go to his map, his survey map,
Which map is that?
this is the map of August 5th, 2014, presented to the commission.
This is part of the application now?
Right.
Thank you.
He changed the boundary line to make this look non-conforming. He created a non-conforming use so he could look like he was making it less non-conforming. This is not the property line, this is the property line. It was conforming, he made it non-conforming for purposes of his application.
So you're saying that the bump out that he had straightened out, had created, was not shown as the bump out on the application?
Right. He changed the property line. I put this in myself. This is the bump out that are in the earlier, and this is the bump out that's in the title deeds. So he changed it. So he could claim then that he trying to get an advantage of 501 to say, well, it's non-conforming, but now it's less non-conforming. What he also didn't do is, this is where the trees were. These are the trees that came out. He shows these trees and one tree to be removed. And there was I watched the minutes, and there was a significant discussion about how this was going to be handled, because he never listed these trees. There was no discussion about these. It's sort of like a magician, you know, you watch over here while I'm doing it over here. The second thing is, this is called a ditch, but this is a water course. And this is a culvert that goes through here. The water course, under the town rules, has to be at least 75 feet. It's not 75 feet. It's 60 feet and it goes to 40 feet.
You're talking about the buffer along the water course, is what you're saying?
No, this is the water course, not the buffer. They're, according to the provisions of, you have to be, a principal building has to be 75 feet
From an open body of water
From
or
a-
a stream.
or a stream of water course.
Okay.
And this is not, and the new one is even closer to it. So what he does is, he also calls this 1.5 stories, but this is 1 story as on the tax records. It's always been 1 story. over here, I'll show you how this was expanded without any, closer to the water, without any permits being filed. So let's go to the next where we get to the site plan. So we already have incorrect boundaries that are made up to show a nonconformity that he could then solve by moving that way and take credit for it. And in fact, there was a significant amount of discussion.
You have no evidence that he did another boundary line adjustment again?
The only two on the record were those in 2009. And besides, the law is that once a non-conformity or a portion thereof has been removed or cured, it can't go back again.
Right.
So even if we tried to do it, we couldn't. So they just changed it because they wouldn't be able to change it to another law. So,
Sure, go right ahead.
I'm just noticing that that map says it's prepared for the property of Margaret, and these are prepared for Dean, but yet it's saying they're the same property.
no, this is the, well, if you look at it, look at that map,
I mean, I
It's
see
dealing with
I see
this.
the discrepancy that you talked about between these two.
Margaret is
Even
Dean's
though
wife.
the date of the,
He did a
survey
quick,
map
they
is
did a
same.
quick claim deed to Margaret. And
after
then Margaret,
this,
yes,
I got you.
and then Margaret sold to KNCT after the approval of,
Okay, just trying to,
a quick claim deed for $100 to Margaret, who then sold it to KNCT after the approval was received.
and is that done by land keeper as well?
Yes.
Keeper, yes it is.
Okay.
So he's got that one. In fact, it refers to the earlier map. It refers to this earlier map, but it doesn't indicate the change. If you see the map here, it's referred to in note 6, and it's referred to in note 7.
I'm a bit confused. You said this is from the application, but
Yes.
Yes,
but you said that the application is Dean on this one and Margaret?
No.
The
These are the maps in 2009.
Thank you.
and he refers to these two maps in this map in notes 6 and 7. So he's aware of that, he had to have a look at it, but he just changed this to make it non-conforming. So, then, going over to the site plan, you'll notice here, as I said, the wood deck, this is much larger now. I don't know when it got done. We go over to the site plan, and first of all, I went to the building department, and there's some discrepancies in the building plans on file. They said they're going to update them. But there's a stairway that comes out here, and is from what I could see, it looks like it's less than 25 feet to here. Yeah, it's a built-in stone stairway with a Bilko door that goes out in the basement and extends out beyond the garage here.
Is that the proposed or the existing?
Proposed. As soon as they got it, the next day the other house was gone. So this is the proposed.
So you're saying, what you're saying, and just trying to cut to the chase, you're saying is that there is a part of the new proposed building that's intruding in the side yard setback?
It has to be measured, but it appears that way because this is 25 and this thing comes out further. And it's not shown on
It's
here.
not, you're saying it's not shown on
Not shown on here.
Right.
But it's part of the property. Now, the house here,
Wait a second, it's not shown on this,
on this,
but it's been built.
Sorry.
We haven't got an as-built here, have we? So this has all been built now, the house is built?
no, well, the foundation's in, and the first floor.
So this is how you see the fact that you've got a Bilko door and a staircase that you believe is intruding into the
Well,
25-foot
yes,
side.
and it's not shown here on the first one.
Not on the proposed, okay.
So then, I also went and I measured from the house to the culvert, it's 40 feet rather than 75, so it's closer. In addition,
The culvert being what you're contesting is
the
the
water
stream.
course here. The water course thing comes out of the culvert to a water course. And the water course, this fits the definition as in the wetlands regulations. This is a water course. They call it a ditch, but it's a water course. And so it violates the 75-foot requirement for a principal building to be at least 75 feet from the water course. So it violates that. Now, in the minutes, they talked about, proudly word that they moved it further back from the water. Well, in fact, this moves further towards the water. It goes in both directions. It's closer to the water than it was before. And the way you can see this is if you see this existing iron pipe here, if I could take one of those maps back.
2009?
Yeah. Here's the existing iron pipe in the 2009 with the existing, the iron pipe and the existing frame building. If you look at this one, the building has come forward of it. Here it's behind it. Here it's moving forward. So it moved forward to the lake, so it's closer to the lake.
Is it, no, it's in the Lake Overlands.
Yes, in the lake overlay zone. In addition, they're supposed to list the areas that are going to be disturbed. The areas that were disturbed, they excavated right up along here to take out all the trees. And indeed, they had to in order to put in the septics and all these other things. In fact, the roots of these trees extend out another 10 or 15 feet. So they had to take the trees out in order to put in this, in order to make the proposed rain garden, all that had to go. And as I say, they didn't cut the trees, they dug them out, roots and all. So this is all excavated within a foot. I got 300 feet of excavated stuff going on right here. In addition, they now have a large second floor. If the house went from 1,500 square feet to 3,700 square feet. So you have a non-conforming house that is now more non-conforming and almost triple in size. And this down here, they show as existing wood structure. This was the deck with a roof, and they added this fan sometime in the last few years without any application. This is within about 10 feet of the high water mark. Oh yes, if you will note, this is kind of interesting. I talked to the Torrington Health Group, Kathy Weber, yeah. And she told me as long as this is a buildable lot, that, and it's more than 10 feet from the property line, that it's okay with them. And I said, well, yeah, but there's a water course. She said, we don't get involved in that. We only get involved in the building line. So I went to the state, and they said, yes, there are restrictions. They're going to get, I only was able to get to them today, but they told me it's either 50 or 75 feet. This is 23 feet from the stream that goes right into the lake. They're off by about, depending on what I get back from the state, they're off by 50 to 25 to 50 feet.
That is if in fact that is a water course.
But it is under the, and I asked them at the state, they said, oh yes, that's a water course. So the state told me it was a water course. And it fits the definition of water course in the wetlands. I have the wetlands regulations if you want me to say to it. So what it turns out is this whole application of the site plan and the survey map is a construct. in order to make an argument to get it past planning and zoning, who would reward them for making it less non-conforming when they created the non-conformity that they purported to have solved. So I'd like to see them stop. That's a monstrosity coming up on my property, and those beautiful trees are gone. Those trees were like 50, 60 feet high. They were just gorgeous. They were kept with a drip pipe and well looked after. And they just took them out. Didn't tell anybody. They just went ahead and did it. They snookered you guys, and they snookered me. And that's why I got so angry. I spent all this time looking at stuff up. But I also believe in protecting the lake. This is terrible to have this type of beautiful specimen trees just destroyed. And it's just very upsetting. So I'd like to know what can we do about it?
And you've seen the Conservation Commission minutes, that they actually looked at it. Have you seen that? They,
I did. I went to conservation last week.
so we have,
They didn't get the site plan. I took the site plan, and they acted like they had never seen it before. And a few days later, I ran into Peter Oliver, and I asked him, I said, you guys, acted like you didn't see it before. And he said, we didn't. That they were told that there was no activity in a regulated area. So they said, okay. And when I showed them the site plan, they were surprised.
I think that's probably coming from the thing that was called a ditch and not a water course. If it was a water course, it would have been a regulated activity.
Yes.
So if you tell them we're to have a ditch, they
We
could have asked the question, was this ditch water course? But they didn't.
They didn't. They didn't see the map that showed the ditch.
Well, even if they did,
Well, they talk about
probably
it.
would have thought it was a ditch.
Well, they
I
say
mean, that's the fundamental problem, isn't it?
Well,
That
this is-
the application, if it is in fact true, that they labeled.
Well, it actually says here in their minutes, a portion of a stream, which is a water course, is enclosed in an underground piping system. So, take a look at this view.
And that would be the portion further up.
Yeah, this
Yes,
is,
but I think what I'm saying is they're calling it a stream there.
yeah, they're pulling a stream here and a ditch here.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Pretty magical.
I don't know when the stream becomes a ditch and the ditch becomes a stream.
Well, maybe you can ditch a stream.
You can. Been doing that for a long time in this country. Yes, Camilla?
You can ask your name, is Reidy?
Reidy.
Reidy. So, what do you think was the motivation for cutting the trees? I think what I heard you say was that it was to get in the septic system?
Well, they had to cut the trees in order to put in the foundation itself, because the roots from the trees extended out quite extensively. On my property, the roots from the trees go out about 20 feet, and I'm going to have to dig all those roots up. But they go out about 20 feet from where the branches were. So, although they show it 25 here, right up to the foundation, in order to put the foundation in, they would have had to cut those roots, would have killed the trees in the end of it.
So it was in their self-interest, you're saying, to get the project through, to get the trees out?
Right. And if they showed those trees as being removed, there might have been a different conversation here tonight if you knew that 40 trees were going to be removed.
Yes, it would have been a different conversation. I think one of the things I think that the commission needs to think about is as we get these applications, to have someone actually go out with the site plan with Nancy and look at these things, because clearly the site plan, it seems like there, we can do that a different discussion. What I'm going to try to institute, if you're willing, is when we get these things, to ask for at least one volunteer to go out with Nancy into the field and look at these things. Because I think we no longer can rely on what we see on the plans always being 100%. So I think that's one thing, an immediate thing I'd like to do is if we start to get applications, is that I ask for a volunteer who will go out talk with Nancy and go over, take the application and roll it on the site, look at all the stuff. But certainly, we would have seen the trees and would have asked questions about the trees.
Well, I'd like to...
But that's one thing we can do going forward, but I guess what do we do going with this now? You've given us a series, there's a series of things that were done that were misrepresented.
Right.
And I'm sure you have the development team here who are going to talk about that. But clearly, when you sign an application for an activity, you attest to the fact of the accuracy. So I consider it's quite serious what you brought up. If in fact, an application has been received and the facts of the matter are wrong. But that's one matter. The other matter are the trees, which I think, and then what possibly could be done at this point to alleviate the problem. So,
Well, I also believe that they should not be allowed to put a second floor on this. That violates the planning and zoning of a non-conforming house being enlarged in the overlay zone, vertically and horizontally.
vertical expansion, they can come back and ask for vertical expansion of a non-conforming house. They have to make an application.
Planning and zoning is pretty...
Well, that's why they can't do it, that's right. The lake, you're right, the lake is not allowed to do that at the lake.
The lake overlay, yes.
So, yeah.
The LA zone.
No, I mean, the lake is everywhere but the lake. Right.
Not the portion that's non-conforming.
Correct.
Right.
So they just received a permit a week ago to build the whole house. They've got the first floor and the basement in. Basement is actually larger than it's shown as well because there's a crawl area that's actually basement. It's about 7 feet deep as I look at it, but it's shown as maybe 3 feet. They also, as I said, on the site plans, on the building plans listed with the town, they have some features there that don't appear on the plan here as shown in the application. Indeed, they show walls coming out from the house that would invade the minimum setbacks and are not shown here. I went to see Mike Fitting today, and he then went out to see them. And they said, oh, we're going to update those. It's a little different. We just didn't have it. Meanwhile, we're already in. So nothing about this. This is an intentional, as far as I can see, unless there's some contrary explanation, a surveyor is not going to make a mistake as to what the lot lines are when he drew the 2 previous surveys. It's an obvious setup of the commission, and they're not allowed to put a second floor in under the planning and zoning. I think a cease and desist order should be issued so they don't start putting in, because this is not the first time this guy's done that. He did it in 144. He did it to his own house, got it up, as this town knows, and caused a lawsuit. But he got everybody in, got it all fixed up, and then said, well, it's already up. What are you going to do? And there was a big litigation. Now we have the chance of stopping it before he puts the second floor on, at least. And then, according to the planning and zoning, if there's changes or if they're lied to, the permit should be null and void in the first place. So I think a combination of not being able to put a stay order, not putting on the second floor while you consider this, so that it's not a fait accompli for you by the time you look at it. And I'm looking at this thing right now. How do I ever replace 50-foot tall trees that will take 20 years to grow?
Well, 50-foot trees in this day and age can be replaced, but they're very expensive. And there's one of them, you can get very large trees and have them. It costs a lot of money, but it's not impossible. They're in the medium, they have like pine trees over there, 100 feet tall. And there is a technology to move and play, but it's expensive. But I'd like to sort of take the conversation. There's 2 things to trees, but I'd like to know about these other irregularities. And have you contemplated a cease and desist order? Have we discussed this with Chuck?
This is the first time that I'm hearing of Mr. Reidy's concerns other than the trees. See,
The trees, I think the trees I understood and had some ideas of how to remedy the trees. Unfortunate as it may be that they were removed. This is, moves into a very serious area, but I don't quite know. I like to really, I think we have to, obviously you have counsel there that's going to say, but I think I don't want to make any decisions until I talk to Chuck. We should talk to Chuck.
May I ask a question, for just clarity? Sure. I think I'm understanding. Are you saying that you believe everyone who drew plans, who certified all of this information that came in front of this commission, altered the information to make it look good for us? Is that what you're saying?
The
The
plan,
surveyor, the engineers, all the people involved in this?
certainly, the surveyor, well, let me say this. The plans were altered to have a boundary that doesn't reflect the true boundary.
By whom?
By
That's a serious
Kiefer, Matt
accusation.
Kiefer. Matt Kiefer.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, Matt, well, yeah, I have two maps here. One shows one boundary, one shows another. So they come from Matt Kiefer, that's the only conclusion, both of them come from Matt Kiefer, that's the only conclusion I can
I
draw.
wish Matt were here if there was any reason that somehow this was changed again. Do I hear what you said, that you can't change a boundary line to increase the nonconformity? I find this all very, very troubling, and I hope there's an explanation.
Well, I'm troubled, and I think this commission needs to be, there are accusations here of improprieties that have very wide-ranging impacts on people's lives and livelihoods.
I'm not making any accusations.
Excuse me, sir.
Okay,
Let me finish.
Okay.
I believe we need to see solid evidence to those. I mean, these are very serious things that are being said here this evening, and that's what concerns me beyond trees or anything else. You seem to be, my impression is, accusing many people, and I don't know what the facts are, of altering documents given to a government body, which are serious, serious offenses.
What I am pointing out, I'm not accusing anybody, I'm pointing out that the map that's submitted was not correct, and that the person who drew that map also drew the other map with different boundary lines, and I don't know how, and he referred to the earlier map in this map, the two earlier maps showing those boundary lines, and I don't know how any surveyor, being a professional person, could make such a mistake and just remove part of the boundary. Now, if there's another explanation, that's fine.
Well, I think
You can explain that, because he owns both pieces, so he can continually do property line adjustments, and they can be upgraded and changed as they move forward. But, and I can appreciate your concern, but I don't think that's the concern that we have, or that I have. The concern that I have is the application that was submitted for the site plan gave indications that things were in order to meet the regulations. And if in fact that ditch is a water course, then we've got a significant error. So I happen to agree with the gentleman. I think we should put at least a temporary stay on doing anything until we can determine what is accurate. Because everything that was represented, we relied on, could still be true and have all these unfortunate consequences of tree removal, but it could still be a valid and approved site plan. So we just need to verify.
we're going to get to you. Okay, well, I'm concerned, and I think there need to be explanations for some of this. I think we may have some explanations coming. Mr. Kiefer is not here, is he? Because he was someone that I think would be the one best able to address this issue.
Well, the site plan was done by engineering. I'm assuming using Kiefer's survey.
May I just point out in the comment to Mr. Higgins that true, you can do property adjustments back and forth, but they couldn't have adjusted this because once, under the law, once a non-conformity is eliminated, it can't be...
Right.
Can't move back.
Yeah, so even if they wanted to,
Right.
they couldn't move that back.
Right.
Yeah.
Once they made the other
Well,
adjustments.
Mr. Reidy, what I would like to do is, I guess you have I'd like to let Mr. Capitolafo, Mr. Jansen, Mr. Laser speak about this, but I think we're going to have to decide
I had requested to be on the agenda tonight, and Nancy said that was okay, but we had to be together on the agenda, so I would like to speak too.
Sure. But Mary, I was very clear, this is about this application, not about the lake.
It is.
Well, okay.
Well, there's a little bit about the lake because it's on the lake.
I know, but it has the
And
specifics of
Nancy
this.
told me to make 10 copies. I told her I would write out what I was going to say, and I have pictures and big print, so it's not as much. I also have 10 copies of the 2005 vision card for that property, which shows it actually as 1.6 acres, but it clearly says it's a one-story building, and it has a picture of it. I also have a microphone on for Mary.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
I also have copies of the site plan in case,
We all have.
where it shows that what was on.
Wait, stop.
Don't slow.
Just stop for 1 second, so we have some order to this. You've submitted the vision, and
The vision card,
vision card,
the memo.
okay, the memo, and now we have a third document being submitted, Mary?
Well, if just to refresh people's memories of what was shown on the maps and not shown on the map.
Okay, that's actually good, that's actually... And please, is there an extra copy? I think in courtesy, we should be giving at least a copy of this to... Is there an extra copy to give to Attorney General Salapro? Do you have one? Great. You have, oh, two. Okay, you've got 3 documents, Mark?
I'd like to, this is the
Wait,
latest.
I'm sorry. One at a time. It's really hard, it's like herding cats here. I'm not at my best tonight. Do you have any more documents?
This is, then, Mr. Reidy has the more recent vision card for that property. It's still showing it as one story.
That's a single copy you're introducing?
That's a
now?
single copy, yes.
All right.
And it shows it at 1.11 acreage to reflect the change in boundary.
Change in boundary, yes.
Right, Mary.
So yes, my name is Mary Stokes. I own property on Lake Winnebago at 123 Jewison Road. And I am always concerned about any proposal that could possibly have a negative impact on the lake. And I wish to comment on the plan for 146 Millerton Road. Some of it, I guess I can skip. After listening to the presentation on September 2nd, I found it to be misleading and, in my opinion, deliberately deceptive to the Commission. The proposal was for the removal of a non-conforming single-family home and the subsequent replacement with a less non-conforming single-family home which covers and extends from the original footprint. There was an overlay map showing that the proposed house would be farther from the lake than the current house, and Attorney Capusalato again stated later in the presentation that the house is farther from the lake than the existing house. So I too have measured, and the measurements are pretty much the same for both the previous house and the proposed house. And if, you just have to, on the previous house, I just made 2 marks. You measure from the lake to the the existing house. And then you just do the same thing on the proposed house. And yes, it is actually a little bit closer to the lake. It's not farther from the lake.
And the scale's the same?
The scale is both 1 inch to 20 feet, yes.
And scales on your ruler though, do you?
You don't need to
check your-
scale, you just need to.
Well, no, I know, but have you, is there a legend that scales? Because it depends on the copy.
Is the legend
Check
saying on both?
the ledger.
The maps,
Map.
1 inch to 20 feet and 1 inch to 20 feet. Yes,
Okay.
yes, and these were presented with this.
There's
Mary, you
sealed-
said
sealed
you were at the
drawings.
meeting where this was presented. Did you say anything at the time?
It was not a public hearing, I could not say anything.
No,
I-
I let people
No,
talk.
I don't. It's not a public hearing, I don't believe I could have said anything.
I could have asked to be recognized, I think you would have been recognized. But anyway, it's water under the bridge.
Anyway,
But if it's closer to the lake, if it's still more than 75 feet.
right, it
then-
doesn't matter, okay, so.
Right.
Was your measurement taken from the same place that the measurement was taken by the people who submitted the plan, do you know?
These are their maps, not mine.
Did you take that measurement
Yes.
from the very same location they did? You know that?
Okay. I know what Mr. Flynn is saying. I mean, these are very serious,
They're
very
watermarking
serious,
these
very
things. They
serious
measure-
charges.
Yeah, if you're saying you took the measure, you have to tell me you took it from the very same spot they did in order for you to have absoluteness that you're correct. If you didn't measure from the same spot,
Well, they
because of the way
measure.
that water line runs, then that's not necessarily what the case is.
Well, okay,
I measured this as well, and I said earlier, I measured it from an existing iron pipe right there.
But well, you know where they measured it from.
What does it matter where they measured it from?
It doesn't matter.
okay. Well, anyway.
Let's
okay.
let's just try to get through this. There's a lot of stuff being dumped on us. And clearly, we're gonna have to bring our order up.
That's why I wrote it out. so
That's
that-
very helpful. I read it, and it's actually helpful. It's basically a lot of what Mr. Reidy said too, but you've actually written it out.
So anyway, about the further from the presentation. So I thought about this for a while. How could you cover the existing footprint and be farther from the lake? So yes, then I measured and, but it's irrelevant in a way because the distance is, they both meet the regulations, so it's not a question of that. But what my problem, I guess, with it was that the claims seemed to be giving the impression that the project was an ecological benefit to the lake. So yes, the records from the assessor's office from 2005, when it was owned by the Buscarens, list the property at 1.6 acres with a one-story house. And on the site plan, it was
I
1.147.
think the impression that was given was that it wasn't an ecological benefit, but it was a less impact to the lake than presently, I think. I mean, it's a fine. I don't think if it was going to reduce the impacts to the lake.
But if it's the same distances.
I understand what you're saying, but I think, words matter here.
Okay,
Okay.
well, it's,
I mean, that
That
was
was
sold, how it was sold to us, that actually was reducing nonconformity and reducing ecological impacts.
so, yes, about where did this half-story come from that is now, it's showing the existing house as 1.5 stories when it's listed on it, so there's a 1 story. And I also, I also wondered at the time, why the regulation 502.1, which states, once your non-conforming situation has been changed to make it conforming, as Mr. Reidy said, it cannot go back to the non-conforming. And there was another discrepancy too with the deeds, that all 3 deeds still say it's 1.6 acres, including the most recent deed that was written after the approval for the proposed house.
May I make a point there? It may be the practice up here that you describe a much larger area that you're granting, but then you say, but you're not getting that because we have a boundary agreement. So it's sort of like, I'm surprised that that's the way it works, but I think the deeds also, although they all say you're getting 1.6 acres, then they say, but subject to the boundary agreements. And the boundary agreements take away half the property, so.
I think so for a long time, I wondered about this missing half acre. Where is the half acre? Where did it go from 1.6 to 1.147? And I think it's the driveway, but I'm not sure about that. But I think it's the driveway that was shifted from one property to the other. Anyway, one of the maps, when they created that bump out, is particularly puzzling to me. And this is in this picture here. It's the HVA, Litchfield Hills Greenpoint Collaborative overlay map, where for some reason it shows the bump out and then it actually shows the trees on Mr. Reidy's property. So I don't know what that is about, but that HVA uses
If it's an aerial, there's a lot, there's some, but I'm not going to even interpret this. Let's start to wrap this up so we can get the other side a chance to say something.
Okay, well,
And then the commission should.
Well, yes, I have pictures
We have lots of pictures.
of the. We have lots of
There comes a time when we're making an application or a point when one can make it too oft repeated and lose one's effect.
I wrote this
Okay,
when I requested to be on the agenda, and I did not know what was
but
going to be.
it seems to be a lot of duplication. Is there anything different or new you'd like to add to this? Because I would like to get the other side on here and move this along for some decision on the commission. It's not that I'm not sympathetic.
I have a picture here too of and it wasn't actually just the spruce trees that were removed. One of the two big maple trees on the property was removed too. In this picture, there's two big maples, and this one is gone. And that actually had a benchmark location.
The USGS benchmark on the tree?
Yeah, right here. And it's gone. So the tree's gone.
The tree was benchmark. Where is this? Okay, that's the benchmark. Okay, yeah. Top of
That's a magnum, that's just a nail.
in the root of the maple. Okay, it wasn't the
Or
USGS.
the surveyor.
Yeah, okay. It's not, okay. I guess a surveyor's benchmark, not a USGS benchmark.
So, again, my concern is that without all these trees, that the property has very little buffer to begin with. It had a very little buffer on that property. And I have a picture there, and I don't count the large stands of Phragmites as a buffer. And
You don't like, you think the rain garden is not efficacious according to your report. You don't think that's going to function?
Well, the proposed rain garden was designed for the roof runoff and the area above the septic, but now it will be adding the area that the trees were in. And when rain gardens, first started, they were really sort of directing interest in property owners to put them in for a roof, a gutter, one gutter or a small area, a downspout. When they're being used as a storm water management system for an entire property, there needs to be a plan to ensure their proper maintenance and functioning. What they're meant to do and what they do well is infiltrate water and stop sediment and nutrients from getting into the lake. And I can tell you from my experience with my 5 large rain gardens is that the sediment that they collect must be removed periodically or they will fill in and not be effective. And believe me, they fill in quickly. One day your blue flag iris is there and then it's under 3 inches of silt. So I don't see any assurances that this in the proposal that the rain garden will be maintained or even preserved in the future. And if the silt isn't removed, I have to do it every year. And there's another property a little bit further down on Millerton Road that has, they have rain gardens and they do them every year.
The silt isn't removed, then they work anymore.
They don't work
They
anymore,
need to
and
be
then
maintained.
your stormwater management is non-existent.
Well, it bypasses the main garden.
Yeah, and it goes into the lake, so.
I get it.
I'm not sure how it applies to what we're talking about.
Well, there was a rain garden as part of the application. I
Right.
think what Mary's trying to say is the rain garden may be undersized or it might be,
Right,
there's no maintenance schedule. But I mean, yeah, it's a small, it's part of the whole thing. Was there no maintenance schedule proposed for the rain garden? We didn't approve that, did we? Probably should have.
So, all right, so I guess you can read the rest if you want.
I think we'd like to take a lot of this and read it. I think it's helpful.
Okay. But I do have another measurement that Mr. Reidy did not have. The creek, the creek.
That's the watercourse.
ditch.
That's a pretty powerful picture, yes.
And
The ditch.
the ditch. And the septic, I have one measurement that Mr. Reidy did not mention. He said it is 25 feet from the ditch creek. But it's also only 100 feet from the lake. And the regulations are, it must be 150 feet from the lake.
Who's regulations?
D&Z.
We have 100.
Not for a new, only for new, not
Yes.
for repair.
Yes, that was my point in here. That it was, the septic system on the site plan was described in the presentation as a new code-compliant septic system. If this was a new system, it would not be code-compliant and would not be approved. It does not meet the negative public health code requirement of being 50 feet from the open water course. But because it was classified as a repair and was on a lot in existence prior to August 16th of 1982, it was allowed to be 25 feet away from Belleville Brook. And yes, in the P&Z regulations, it says that it must be 150 feet away.
For a new outfit.
Yes. And I have that in here too, that in your regulations, if it is classified as a repair or replacement, that doesn't apply for it.
But this was a replacement, right?
It was a repair.
It's an existing lot with an existing house, so the system that is there is considered a repair or
By
replacement.
code, yeah.
By code.
Yes,
It is-
yes,
it is
because
not-
I talked to Kathy
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying really is that, so this project has certainly taken advantage of all the exceptions to the regulations, but maybe the regulations are there for the protection of our lakes and streams. So I think, in the future, going forward, perhaps this would be an example of maybe things that we want to change now that we see.
Change regulations or change how we look at these things?
I think that there needed really to be more scrutiny with this project.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And I think, I do have another comment. The NEMO project at UConn states that impervious surfaces such as asphalt, concrete, rooftops, and compacted earth prevent the infiltration of water into the ground. So I would, like to see this commission perhaps take another look at that definition of impervious surfaces.
A lot of things we think of as pervious really aren't.
So I think that this type of plan is going to come up again, and the next time that it does, you know, maybe a few things could be changed in the regulations so that the next time there are not so many exceptions that I think negatively impact the labor.
If I could just make a comment to Mr. Flint's earlier statement about crossing around accusations. I will say that in the written minutes, when Matt Kiefer made his presentation, he said it will now achieve total conformity with side yard setback requirements. So he concentrated on that will now achieve conformity, when he had to know they weren't in non-conformity. And the other thing I'd like to just make mention to Mary's statement about the 150 feet. True, it's a replacement. So it does, that in and of itself doesn't violate anything. But when you take the sum total of, okay, we're going from non-conforming to more non-conforming, and in addition, we're moving it from 300 feet to less than 100 feet to the lake. Taken in total, it's a disaster.
So can I just get clarification?
Yes, go right ahead, John.
So you're saying what they currently have started to build, the foundation, is in violation of the setback?
No.
Because the new plan that was submitted as a site plan,
Well, they
replaced all of that. So regardless of whether it was non-conforming before, they built a new building after tearing down the old one, according to the site plan that they submitted. So I'm confused by why you're saying it's in violation because it's more non-conforming when they actually made it conforming.
Well,
By the plan process.
no. It was not, the side yard was never non-conforming. They drew a map line showing it to be non-conforming and then cured it by moving the house and say, see, we now have it conforming. But it was never non-conforming in the first place. The second thing is, what I said was, on the other
It was
side,
never conforming.
it was never non-conforming.
They cured it with a bump out.
Yes.
They cured it with a bump out, then they removed the bump out, and then they re-cured it again as part of their application. Is believe what Mr. Reidy is trying to say.
They show a different boundary line in their application than is shown in the title records. The other thing on the side yard, the plan as shown is not the plan that's in the ground. There's a Bilko door cement part of the foundation that goes out further towards the other side, and it may well be within 25 feet.
Right.
And the non-conforming aspect is, as they moved it forward, they moved it closer to the stream.
Right.
And then the other thing, aside from the 150, they're still in violation of state regs with regard to putting septic leaching fields within 50 feet of the stream.
Yeah.
Now, I have to get confirmation on that, but that's
And that's the Torrington area health coordinates with the state.
But
So
I think
that's
that's sort of one of the fundamental errors here, that we looked at it as not a stream because the map.
You saw that picture of that stream that really,
Right.
okay. So,
But the stream is buildable. It's the same issue that I've been here before about the delta.
Right.
So you'll see, you see the delta on the pictures that.
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this. Now, Marvin, would you like to say something about this? Do you have anything in writing other than Mr. Laser's?
Well, I'm the only copy of Mr. Laser's notice.
Oh, will you do that tomorrow?
Oh, can you
Or I
get
can-
one right now?
Actually, here, I'm going to go right now.
Thank you.
You're not leaving yet, are you?
Oh, no. Should I take this or leave it here, or?
That's yours, and you're
Yeah.
not introducing it, please. take it.
Well, I did anything to
Those are
this?
his.
Those are Mr. Reed.
Those are Mr.
Yeah, do you need them?
No, I think Mary Stokes has given us that we.
Okay, because I also, I noted on here the various changes where they were consistent with, if this would be helpful.
Is it the same thing that Mary Silks?
No, it's not. I mean, on here I have notations that would help you understand a bit.
This is your older copy?
Yeah, but I can, the artwork is not so terrific, I can't do another one.
No, but I'm saying if you need it, I can make a copy of that down in the assessor's office.
Well, I can get
And
it.
then I can keep
Yeah, I think we
You
should
can
keep
keep,
it.
you can keep it now. I'll
Let's
take
keep
a copy
it.
tomorrow.
Okay, and that's what I'm saying, keep it coming tomorrow, and I'll make a
Okay.
copy.
And then, you want me to also, you want to see this is the bump out, maybe you'd like to keep that.
Take it, we'll get back to it.
And I had the two boundary line agreements that change the boundaries, so it's not this one, if you'd like to see that.
No, I think we're okay with this one.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And I'll also, this is the, I'll also give you this that shows,
Fine, just give it all to Nancy and we can make copies and get it back to you. Okay? Just like to move this along.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, Mark.
Happy for your time.
For the record, Mark Tappas, representing the owners, 146 Millerton Road. Let's start at the beginning of the accuracy of what was presented. The site plan presented by, prepared by Matt Keeper and sealed by Matt Keeper as a Class A2 survey accurately reflects the boundary lines of this property. That's fact.
What about the bump out?
This reflects the boundary line of the property as it stands today. Now, the fact is that the site plan proposed a house that is 100% conforming to wherever that bump out may be. It is more than 25 feet from the side yard. Further,
Is the bump out there or the bump out not there?
bump out is not there.
Was the bump out there previously?
I believe it was. I have to look
Where
at
did the bump out go?
It was, that's what he was.
There's a map that shows it. Whether it was conveyed that way, I would have to go back and look at the.
So you're saying that possibly it could have been conveyed incorrectly, and the conveyance could have created a non-conformity again?
That is correct. It could have happened.
Okay.
However,
Do you have the land record that we adjusted the bump out back? Because we have supposedly two land records that show the bump out. Is there a boundary line adjustment on the property, in the records that show it back?
I believe that there is. I don't have the land records immediately accessible to me, but I can provide that. I will.
So you're saying that basically they switch it, you're saying is that they actually switched it back and created a non-conformity again, violation of zoning?
I'm saying that Matt's boundary line is accurate. I don't have the land records in front of me or the files.
All right.
Before making a statement saying this is so.
We need a lot of information.
Understood.
On this issue.
Right. But let's deal with conservation. Go ahead, John.
John, go ahead.
Related to that, and I don't remember, was there an A2 survey from Matt at the same time as there was this survey from Allied Engineering for the site plan?
That plan is based on the A2 survey that Matt gave me.
That's for the record, Mr. Johansson.
Right.
John, do you want to have Mr. Johansson come up and question this?
For sure, sir.
Really,
I guess the confusion for me is that at the time of this site plan application, there was this change in the boundary line, which eliminated the bump out, correct?
But that happened not, the change in the bump out was some years ago, I believe, so.
But if the change in the bump out to get rid of it happened before, that's what the gentleman's saying, that's what made it non-conforming. So the application that came before us showed it as conforming, when in fact it wasn't.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that. The application that came
At some
before
point,
you showed where the boundary line is as of today, according to the.
right, and what I'm saying is the existing building with the new survey would have been non-conforming because it got moved back. I completely understand that the new proposed building that was torn down and a new one was going to be put in a conforming way.
Right.
But what we understood was that there wasn't a change in the map that was dealing with the nonconformity, or we would have had that as an issue.
I understand. The boundary line that Matt showed was the boundary line. Whether or not there was an error in reconveying, I don't know. But the boundary line is as shown on that site plan.
So would you agree that the existing building with the new boundary lines was in violation of setback before you make these new changes?
The existing building, being the one that has been removed,
Correct.
was not in conformity because it was within 75 feet of the stream, which is an issue that was also discussed at the site plan approval application hearing. So it was not conforming, and by the change in location of the building, it was rendered less non-conforming in that regard.
I don't think we had any indication that there was a stream.
What site
long
plan
discussion.
application hearing?
What's that?
About the stream?
We had a long discussion about that.
It wasn't a hearing. It was a
No, it's a
discussion.
site plan approval application.
Right.
We had a discussion about the stream
And there
and the
was
75-foot setback from
a
the stream.
deck or, what was it, not Salisbury?
There had been a deck that had been proposed, the house was moved farther up the hill to further reduce the non-conformity. So that bump out or no bump out, there was.
But that's not shown on the map?
What?
That stream?
It's shown on the street.
I think we need the issue survey.
I know where it is, but I don't see it.
We really don't have a document.
Where's the stream?
It's a stormwater ditch. The soil scientist stopped by to use as a
Good
wetland.
soil scientist.
Stopped at the base and said the rest of that is a stormwater ditch because it's not a wetland soil.
So this picture is a stormwater ditch because this is after a storm? Is that what you're saying? So it's not,
Stormwater ditch, it's a stormwater ditch because Tom Petra says it doesn't have hydrophytic soils, and under Connecticut law, wetlands and watercourses are defined by the present hydrophytic soils.
so therefore the 75 feet doesn't come into play?
But we did
Well,
discuss it. We
We're
did
trying to
discuss
have it so it's the same both ways, that's all. You can't say it was
You
a
can't
stream and it was
Well, I think that's
75 feet
all
away,
part
now
of
it's
this
not a
application
stream.
is there's a lot of disconnects and things.
We discussed this, and then we ended up.
We ended up looking at this.
71.6 or something like that, what did it end up being?
There's a little corner.
70.1.
7.1. Right. So part of the building that it caught, is it part of the habitable space or is it outdoor?
Part of it is
Is it a deck? Or is
the
it-
orange that's here. This was here at the meeting.
That was the pre-existing.
That was the pre-existing building. The pink highlight is the proposed new structure. So you can see here, this was shown, and there's the 75-foot circle. And the orange is the existing, the new building.
So really, regardless of wherever the boundary is, that building in relation to that point there has not changed.
The building
That's
that was
still
taken
the
down.
non-conforming part right there, right. That part of the building that was non-conforming because of the
Proximity to that.
water course.
Right.
Just to state,
It doesn't matter where the boundary was, that remained the same.
The, this portion,
So it's just
this
this black
that
triangle.
little black triangle
Yeah.
is all that remains of the non-conforming as opposed to this larger area. And then we had considerable discussion
I
about
think
that.
Maggie came up with a square foot area.
Additionally,
Communication of what was,
So your contention is that basically it is a ditch and not a stream?
what I'm saying is that we considered it to be a water for purposes of the setback. And so plotted it here. This is all piped to that point. And that was discussed, and it was also discussed. Everything that came before this commission at the September meeting was presented at the Conservation Commission meeting. We bring everything the same to every meeting, so they're approving what you're seeing. Or saying that what we are.
They say they never saw any plans that come.
We brought it, whether they look at them or not, that's on them.
Okay, I understand.
But we bring, everything that we bring to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we bring to the Conservation Commission. So to say that we didn't see it, it was there,
I understand.
and probably was discussed. If you chose not to go through it, or you chose not to focus on it, that's on you. But that was discussed, and as the minutes reflect, we also talked about this as being a
They
stream.
determined to be an insignificant activity.
That's correct.
Another question for you, Mark. Is it closer to the lake? As proposed in the drawings?
The house will sit.
From the
One
picture
at a
here,
time, structure. One at a
The
time.
structure.
Alan and then Kathy.
if you look at this map, which was here, the existing house was closer to the lake than the proposed house. Again, pink is proposed.
Right.
The orange was the existing. This is closer to the lake than the proposed structure.
Kathy? You had a
No,
question?
that wasn't my question, I was just clarifying whether he was talking about the structure or the sector. Thank you, I got my answer, it's the structure.
Okay.
May I go back one quick point
Yes,
to
Mr.
the
Flynn.
Conservation Commission? Has this commission received in writing from the Conservation
There was
Commission
the
that they
It's
did
in the
not
minutes.
see these plans?
No.
Because what I've heard here tonight was hearsay. Someone else said they said, but have we directly had communication with them and they in fact confirmed it themselves?
We have the minutes. The minutes said they reviewed it and it's an insignificant activity.
No, I understand. But
And you assume if they reviewed it, they've looked at it.
Well, yeah.
That's my assumption.
There are people saying that they did not.
Well, it's hearsay, you're correct. There's a lot of,
I
this
just
is,
want that to be clear. I mean, there's a lot of things here that need to be clear.
there's a lot of this going on.
Words are significant here tonight.
Is this a vertical expansion?
Vertical
Is this a
expansion
vertical expansion?
of a
Or
non-conforming.
non-conforming use?
No.
Because it's all conforming, it's
Well, it's not.
supposed to be.
Only this section, only this tiny triangle is non-conforming, and that is a one-story section, which was it was one story before.
So the area that's drawn up, you're saying is conforming?
That's correct.
How about this bill goes over the staircase?
Well, I mean,
Is it going to, is it within 25 feet of the side yard setback? No?
No, it's not. It's shown, I can show you where,
Why wasn't it shown in the original plans?
because it wasn't on the original building plans that we received.
These are building plans,
That was installed after,
different than ours.
I think that was an afterthought. I'm not sure exactly why, but.
But does it conform, in your opinion, does it conform to zoning?
Yes.
It is not within, it is within, not greater, less than 25 feet from the property.
It is not.
and remembering that there will be an as-built produced by Mr. Keeper to show that the structure is.
We have had a request tonight, as you've heard, that because of all of this, that we won't want to stop this and really look at it. So I'm trying to get to the bottom of some of these very specific questions that were asked. One was, are you within 25 feet or less than 25 feet of the side yard setback?
Mr. Johansson
She
said
said
no.
no. You're saying now that the house is shown, the new house is further back from the lake, not further to the lake?
That's correct. That's shown on the site plan.
George, was there any adjustments made for erosion sedimentation control plan because of additional work that was done on
Absolutely.
the trees?
Let me show you that as well. These black lines with the S in them, right here,
Silt fence?
those signify a silt fence. We had it around here, we had it across here, down here.
These are the building plans that we don't have.
Say that again?
These are the building plans or our plans?
This is the same site plan that was approved. I just updated it to show the existing.
So you've updated the submission that was submitted to
No,
us?
no, no, no. This is just clarification for discussion tonight. I'm showing what additional silt fence was installed compared to what was proposed and what was approved. We're showing the Velcro door, that was a point of discussion, and we're showing a proposed row of trees to replace the trees. that-
So you have a supplemental submission tonight to address some of these concerns, is what it is?
That's what you like to call it. Give us more of the clarification.
Well, I'll call it a supplemental submission. You have an objection calling it a supplemental submission?
No.
Very good.
So, what Mr. Johansson is indicating that out of the original plan, this section of silt fence was plotted, but the actual installed silt fence comes all the way to here. The original section of silt fence was this, but we have this additional section, and then there is silt. This was not on the plan at all originally. This additional silt fence coming here and going up this boundary line has been installed. And you have the photographs.
These
The
are,
photographs of the silt fencing.
Do you really wish to give that to us? I mean,
Well, if there's a question about,
no, we see the silver. I mean, what I'm trying to do is we are getting so much paper.
that's fine.
We're going to pay someone. to
we'll withhold the photographs of the.
I think we know what silk fence looks like.
I just went out today to clarify for the meeting today what's in effect, and these are dated photographs, that's why
Well, if you wish to, you can, but I mean, it just, if you want to submit them, you can. I'm not going to say don't, but I mean, we have a huge amount, just the date, just that.
numbers 1 through 7.
Okay, so this is a supplemental of the, this
So did you feel, George, I mean, silt fence will do the work for the amount of, I mean, it's quite a long slope. I mean, is there any kind of retention basin, or is there any?
Right now, there isn't, they just regraded the area behind the house today. They're going to be installing the septic tomorrow, and as soon as they can cover it on Friday, it's all going to be covered, topsoil, and we were just discussing whether they're going to hay it or they may spray it with the hydro seed that has the binder in it that creates an actual crust over it so that the water can't penetrate it. That's what we didn't want.
So for the winter, I mean, you know, salt places will
It'll
remain.
be addressed for winter depending on how the weather goes. If we can get grass to grow, that'd be great. If worse comes to worse and we have to do something more,
you're going to get grass to grow.
I'm saying if we're lucky.
We're not going to get grass. There's no grass growing.
So it will either spray or we may put erosion control fabric at all.
Are you saying it's going to be stabilized?
It will be stabilized for the winter,
For
absolutely.
the winter.
Yep.
Any benefit to something like Filtrex socks or double layer?
We were discussing that on site today. In my opinion, I don't think it's needed. If anything, I would put a row of hay bales behind the silt fence instead of the socks. Because in the spring, the socks end up getting molded into the ground. When you remove them, you're creating more of a disturbed area. The hay bales decompose and you can use them for mulch.
If, so this is very hard upon winter. So what, and are you going to continue construction through the winter? Is that your plan?
They want to get the septic system, the sand is already in for the septic, and they had to stop that because of the foundation work. So the galleries are there, the plan is to install the septic system tomorrow, Thursday. And Kathy's coming out to review it on Friday. As long as she's okay with it, it will be backfilled and covered, and then the service will be addressed.
So I think to follow on Commissioner Coghlan's question, you're representing that the S&E controls you have in there are going to be adequate to see you through the winter? Because you're not going to have grass growing now.
We'll be addressing it as we go through the winter as well. If there
You're
are-
going to be monitoring it?
Yes.
Do we have any requirement for monitoring in that?
No, but we'll keep on top of it.
The owners asked specifically.
Sir, if you're going to talk, you're going to have to come up and identify yourself and sit at the table, which you're all welcome to. Please, use the mic.
Fred Lacer, Lacer Building Company. The owners specifically asked that it be monitored by George throughout the whole process to make sure we were meeting all the requirements of the site plan. Very specific about that. Secondly, regarding the Bilco, there was a Bilco on the plan. It was moved to the other side because there was some structural issues against the foundation.
Building plan.
Building plan, correct, on the building plan. So,
I really don't care where the BOCO is as long as it's not within, it's not creating a non-conformity.
yes,
I mean, we understand that building plans change around modifications.
correct.
But if as long as it's not within, and yeah, I think we're gonna have to go out and have that measured to be sure.
Well, I was going to suggest, the foundation was there, correct? Why couldn't you do that as built right now? As long as you're willing to do one now and one when the project's done. No, it isn't, but.
Doesn't mean it won't be added to.
I mean, that's just a
I think
suggestion.
to address those concerns, it should be done.
Yeah, we'll ask Mr. Kiefer to put that on the schedule to do, and we'll come to the commission with it. And
I would also like Matt Kiefer to come and discuss the bump out, how it happened, when it bumped and when it's out, when it's back. I didn't know that. It's sort of his opinion on that.
I will look at the land records and check that, provide.
I'd like to, next week, continue to discuss it and Matt come.
Yes, we'll have Matt here.
With all of us, and I think we'd like to hear it from Matt. And I respect the lawyers, but I like to hear it from the professionals.
We're not professionals.
The professionals, yes, we're professionals.
Just want to make that clear, Chairman.
I'd like to hear from the land use people with their hands in the ground.
We'll have Matt here the next time we discuss this.
But I don't know what we're going to do with this. This is the question. I mean, we have a lot of stuff that's been given to us. We have conflicting reports of what's happened. We've got a pile of information. I mean, I think we've got to read. John suggested a cease and desist appropriate because of the second story expansion that may be non-conforming. There are a lot of questions.
I was thinking of that in terms of a temporary hold until some of this information can be confirmed.
Yeah.
Rather than allow it to continue if in fact is all accurate.
But there is no second story expansion in a non-conforming area. There is no second story that's...
I think we have to demonstrate that in fact, you are all in a non-conforming, and demonstrate that in fact this whole bump out thing that's been described is as you're describing it. Otherwise, you do have potentially a non-conforming. You have to figure it out.
I would like to just, I don't think that we should issue a cease and desist. It's very time sensitive right now, and especially when I'm getting a septic system and I'm trying to stabilize the ground. And if we review all of the documents compared to, I'm finding answers to many questions that are being provided right now. I think if we review the documents in light of everything that we've received, I think we'll be able to come to a very pretty clear.
But I think it's going to take some time to review those documents. I don't think we should start with the septic, but there's a question of the concern that was issued was if we allow the vertical expansion to continue, and then in fact we find out that it's
pretty easy to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, if the vertical expansion of the second floor is in the conforming area, it's not a...
Mark, in all due respect, from what has been laid out tonight, seems to be quite murky to me, and I'm not sure what is conforming and what isn't on this bump out. Until we have real clarity on the bump out, and whether or not this was conforming or not conforming, I am really uncomfortable letting the second story go on.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
If, I didn't know anything about the bump out, so I'm clueless about it, to tell you the truth. But if the bump out was pushing the property line further away from the building, wouldn't that make the proposed building more in conformance?
I have to take a look.
I'm just saying.
There's been a lot of stuff.
Back. When they took the bump out, this is what my understanding is, when they put the bump out back, the existing building now became non-conforming.
It was not, even with the bump out back, it was, even with the bump out present, the building was not conforming.
Well, that's not what I understood.
No, it's not what I understood.
Made it conforming.
It made that side of the house conforming, but it did not make it conform to the setback from the stream.
Yeah, but we're talking now, I think we're talking about
Or setbacks.
setbacks,
No,
not
that's
side
okay.
yard setbacks.
Right.
Because it was presented to us that now this whole thing conforms with side yard setbacks. It's sort of like, a bit like a shell game. I mean, here it is, here it isn't. I mean, if you had basically if you basically already had solved the non-conformity, and as been discussed by some drawings, have taken the non-conformity back and then reintroduced it, you're curing it again, there's something a little bit squirrely about that. I think we need to get to the bottom of it. In all due respect.
Could I ask one
No.
question?
Not now.
No.
You've had a lot of time, but we can ask after these people.
The proposal is to replace the line of trees with a row of 12 to 14 foot arborvitae, but obviously that won't happen until next year, and there'll be some additional arborvitae planted up here.
There's a fence 1 foot in from the property.
And there will be a fence proposed to go 1 foot from the property line. Again, anything down here within 100 feet.
Well, the trees are stopped.
Trees are stopped more than 100 feet
Let me
from the
clarify about
Why
that.
so small? I mean, you got rid of 50-foot trees and you're putting back 12-foot trees. You certainly can get things bigger than that to help at least hide this house from the neighbor. You could certainly get 20-foot trees. You can get some of the arborvitaes of her, you could do better than that, I think. Don't you?
Not my field, we've been asked.
I mean, you've taken away the gentleman's screening of his property, he's looking at it, took down the trees, and you've got a letter from different arborists. I thought my group wrote the letter.
No, it was not my group. I was originally advised Mike was on the property, but not for this purpose.
Oh, I see, okay. But I certainly think you could probably do better in the height of trees than 12 to 14 feet.
Whatever the height, this will be replanted. Now, just to clarify, there's a lot of disinformation that was submitted tonight as well, and an awful lot of hearsay that was presented as if it was fact. The fact of the matter is that all of the trees that were removed from on the property known as 146 Millerton Road. So none of the trees were Mr. Reidy's trees. They belonged to the owners of 146 Millerton Road. And yes, they've taken down. The plan was not to take them down. When we came before you in September, the plan was to leave those trees. Yes, some trimming was going to have to be done. But
why did you have every tree on there marked DBH, what it is, and the rest of this just said woodland? There was never any indication on the plans that there was a large row of big mature trees that probably had, probably anywhere from 16 to 18 inches in trunk diameter, if not more. Why wasn't that shown?
We didn't receive that information from the surveyor. We received the perimeter of the brush line, and that's what was shown.
And there was no
But let me finish. You don't think that, you show it as a perimeter of the brush line, and then you decide to take them out. You don't think it would have been helpful to have come back and ask us about this? Because it was the assumption nothing was happening there. It was woods. Now you're taking away all the woods.
When we made the presentation, the assumption was that those trees were going to stay.
Right.
That was the assumption, whatever the woods were staying. Now the woods aren't staying. And so turns out the so-called woods are made up of 50-foot plus trees. Don't you think there's something a little bit disingenuous about this?
Well, quite disingenuous, but it was not part of the plan. There was no intention to take those out.
But you did. You did. You took them
Conditions
out.
in the field, we were told that these were diseased, and they were taken out. Now, looking at our regulations,
It's very interesting how often when trees are taken down, how quickly they become diseased.
well, that's the opinion of the landscaper. So, and we do have photographs of the tree. But it wasn't material, and it's not required.
Yes, I believe if you ask Mr. Reidy, it is quite material to his well-being.
In terms of what the application requires, Mr. Chairman, you're not required to field locate all of the trees, and my clients were not intending to touch those trees.
But they did.
But they did. There is, I did not see in the regulations where if you were going to take out trees, we must come back before the commission. If you have a zoning permit and you end up cutting trees, I look at the property, as Hollywood. There were weeks worth of cutting trees down within the lake protection overlay zone.
You came with a site plan indicating there was woodland to be left, and the woodland is gone. That was what was on your site plan. There's no more woodland there. Whether the woodland is a mixture of trees or whether it was 50-foot tall spruces, it's gone. Therefore, I believe that was, not, you made a major change to the plan, in my opinion, by taking away the woods.
Can I ask for a point of clarification? Is there an ordinance or is there a regulation that specifically prohibits a property owner from taking trees down?
No.
But you came with a site plan showing what you were going to do. And the presentation of the site plan
And
in
that's what was the
totality,
plan at that time.
That was the
but
plan.
to change the plan substantively.
Mhm.
Substantive change to that plan. That's what I know. You're quite correct. We don't have a tree ordinance, but we do a site plan. We ask, we show trees, we had a discussion about one tree, quite detailed. We have now a whole, how many were there? How many trees were taken down?
I don't know.
It was close to 50.
Close to 50 trees.
Mhm.
And that, to me, you have a site plan where you're showing the woodland is gone. You don't think that's a major deviation from your site plan? I'm not talking about tree cuts, it's what you showed was going to happen.
We showed what the plan was at the time that we were before you. Conditions in the field dictated a change.
I think when you say conditions in the field, there's small changes you make. This was a major change. Should have come back to the commission on this one. This was not a minor field change. This was a big change. That's all I'm going to say about it.
But I think, to Fred's point, the house could be built and finished and completed, and they could have cut that row of trees down a year from now
Correct.
without any issue.
That's absolutely right.
And I agree that I'm concerned that the trees were cut down, but I don't see that being the issue in terms of the application, because we did see what we saw at the time of the application. I agree with what you're saying, that there has been change, but that could happen later on as well, and the intent is to replace them. I think the bigger issue for me still is of this boundary and the setback issue.
Well,
Because those are really different than what we reviewed, then I think that's where we have an issue, because, the trees not.
But it also points to the veracity of what's given to us. I mean, the boundaries,
Sure.
and then, you're showing this big sort of puffy area of woodland.
Right.
If, it said that the woodland was all going to be clear cut, you may have asked questions about protecting the neighborhood. You may have asked about it, could somebody or asked for a tree preservation plan. But you didn't, I think it's major. That's my opinion.
I'm just telling you that when we presented this application to you, there was no plan to cut down that row of trees.
Cut down 50 trees.
Right, there was no plan to do that. The idea was that down in the area where the septic is, timber grading went into there, they were going to trim the limbs up and extend the fill in there and leave it alone. And afterwards, the decision was made. But when we presented this application to you, it was a 100% honest application. Those trees were going to be left.
But they weren't.
I understand what you're
And
saying.
I just think if we,
I just want to go back to the.
I understand.
discussion of the
I
propriety.
understand. You took discuss about it. Your intent was to save them, that you did. I just think that it probably would have been good to have comment. Consult the commission.
There actually isn't any process or procedure in order to discuss it with a commission or a tree person or ordinance person in terms of asking to cut. Because if we had to come in front of you, so wouldn't everybody that wants to cut some trees. I mean, I just don't see.
It's a site plan.
It's a site view.
But it's a site plan.
Understand.
I mean, after it happens, there's a site plan. You came to a site plan, and frankly, I don't consider cutting down 50 trees a minor field adjustment.
Mhm.
I would have said, if I were on the project, I said, I better go back and disclose this to the commission.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
it's not a minor field modification. And it's a site plan. You're quite correct. You could come back in a year after they own it and taken them all down. But the site plan comes as part and parcel with the trees, with the rain garden, with the meets and bounds, and with your plans, your driveway. We look at the whole thing in totality as a site plan review. And a big piece of the site plan review just disappeared without coming back. And then we have the other issue, which I agree with John, the other issue, trees, I kind of feel we were hoodwinked on the trees, not intentionally, you say, but it happened de facto, we don't have the trees. But I think the other issues are I want to get to the bottom of the other issues, because as Mr. Flynn said, very serious things that have been said tonight about professionals and what they're doing. I think we need to get to the bottom of that.
Would it make any sense to have a revised site plan? I mean, I'm not comfortable with a supplemental one coming in after we've done the approved one. But after all we've seen, maybe there's some merit to a new site plan that clarifies all of this muddy stuff. That maybe we can just have a special meeting and go over it.
But we're going to need to get the as-built from Matt. I don't know what his timing would be on that.
Right.
But I'll stop and visit him tomorrow.
I mean, I can appreciate your position. It's just if we do find out there were significant errors in the way it was presented, then we've wasted another month or 6 weeks.
I want to see the site plan. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I wanted to point out that one of the site plan review standards is preservation of the existing landscape. And this change in taking down trees is a pretty significant change in the site plan. And ideally, it would have been good to have come before us and said, here's an amended site plan, and this is how we're going to do it, this is how the S&D is going to go. And
that would have been much better to have come and say we have to do this for this and that. Here's the thing from the arborist and that. Instead, we find out about it in this very untoward way, which makes us really unhappy.
And there's a lot of hearsay about the trees, about how big they were, about whether they were diseased or not. If we had had a chance to move it over, we could have said, okay, yes, they're diseased, and proved it on some basis.
But to explain how coming back would be difficult, somebody who was involved in site plans, who would be does the legal part of it, would have needed to know. And when you have people out in the field and the decision is made to cut, they don't come to me. I mean, so I don't think there's an awareness that if you're going to take down trees, then maybe you better come back to the commission. That should be known in the wider community, because had it been presented, that would have been discussed and maybe we would have been here. But I found out about this when Mr. Reidy's letter was forwarded to me, so there was no opportunity to give counsel on that. So, but that's it's part of the process of educating.
Everybody who's on that site has a set of plans, the contractors, right? All those plans had woodland along the edge. So I think somewhere in the chain of command on this project, someone should have said, well, we're taking away the woodland. That's a big change.
I would ask that Mr. Laser is a builder, and I think Mr. Schmidt being a builder could speak to that as well. I mean, what would lead them to think that they need to go back to zoning to cut down, to consider cutting down trees? I mean,
that's shown on the plan as that part of it is the landscape. Shown on the plan is staying, and it's disappearing. I think you need to come back and work with us and ask us, this is why it has to disappear. We got to have a discussion of what kind of reason. I'm not even sure if a row of arborvitaes is the best thing to do that. It's the most prudent and ecologically best way to screen and to replace it. Maybe other ways. We could have had that discussion.
Admittedly, that would have been better, certainly, to have the discussion. But what happened, normal construction practices, you bring in a landscape person, the decision was made to take them out, and by people who did not necessarily think through.
Did you ever think that, what the impact would be on the neighbor? All of a sudden, these trees, the forest goes? I mean, part of what we try to do on this is we try to balance the rights of the property owner to reasonably use their property with protecting the neighbor. You stripped away the neighbor's entire visual screen. You didn't think that was a problem? You think, you know, I mean,
Again.
it's just, it just bothers me. I'm
May I
sorry.
make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, Mr.
I
Flynn.
have to somewhat disagree with you on this,
Okay.
because our regulations are extremely vague. I've read this over again and again over the last several days, and I have to concur that, and I too have been out there in the field building homes and dealing with these types of things, that there's really no clarity in these regulations concerning trees and the cutting on these boundaries. And while I understand people are upset about it, we need to clarify those regulations if this is the case. And it needs to be clear for those on the job sites having experienced this. Every time you run into a delay, and you've got to wait weeks to come to a commission to get permission to move something that's in the way, the whole job site comes to a halt and costs a lot of money. If we're going to have this and we want to do this, and I personally don't, we need to also have a system in place because we have to respect the people that are making a living as well. And essentially, too, to the argument of the neighbor's screening. These trees were not on the neighbor's property. You know, there can be an argument made, if you want screening, maybe you need to put your own screening up. These belong to this person, and with all due respect, I don't agree with you 100% on what you're saying here. I think they were within all the rights and the understanding of our regulations, as I've read them multiple times again in these last several days, to have considered that this was not an issue. And they have been considerate to say, you know, we plan to put a bank of trees back up. There are a lot of trees in that area that are diseased and rotten. I can tell you, I live on a property right up across the road where we've got a bunch of them. And every time there's a storm, another one falls down, it's got a big hole in the middle. And so they're coming down piece by piece, either by nature. There's a lot of rotten trees out there. And it'd be much better to have a fresh tree row planted and all. So, with all respect, I think we need to stick within regulations. We've heard a lot of suppositions here and accusations. I'm concerned about accusations that have flown in this room about people who aren't even here to defend themselves against some pretty strong accusations. We need to stick to regulations and not allow our emotions to get involved here. This is a very sensitive thing we're looking at here. We know this from the past, right in the same neighborhood. I guess we need to be cautious about the emotions here.
Okay, I guess my problem on this is that they showed a design feature on the site plan called woodland. It wasn't just one or two trees, it was a woodland, and the woodland is gone. Much as you would show a driveway, much as you would show a patio, they showed woodland, and the woodland is gone. And that's where I make the distinction. I agree with you, the trees can be cut and trees can be cut, but when you take away what's a design element shown on the site plan, that's where I think we've strayed into something somewhat troubling to me.
Of course, the challenge for the commission is going to be able to communicate the need to come back to the commission if somebody thinks that whatever they might feel that they need to do post-site plan approval could be construed as a major consideration by the commission. So you may have, you have to clearly get the word out and then be prepared to be talking about cutting trees wherever site plans are
Well,
approved.
if you were going to move your driveway, move your patio around, how much of that would you do before you would come back here?
If we were going to change any of this,
Yeah.
we would come back first.
And
now
that's
a good
You
proposal.
see, I guess maybe I'm a little bit, I'm trying to be reasonable, but I kind of viewed the woodland that was shown there as sort of equivalent with the buildings as being part of the overall site.
I think that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to respect, I think that's a stretch.
I mean,
Well, it's a
some
buffer
different-
area, and buffer areas are mentioned in the site plan review standards.
Right.
And the woodland as shown is a buffer area.
Well, I'm having trouble finding where you guys are seeing woodland other than the graphic. But regardless, I don't think it's material to the issues that are really here. It's unfortunate for the neighbor, and it's unfortunate that it was on this site plan that's done, but they could move that existing wood structure down by the lake and not have any impact on the building, but it'll change what we've seen on the site plan. They can remove that existing gazebo, and they wouldn't have to come in and do anything to that. But I think I'm still going back to the boundary line issue.
That's the issue.
That's the core So,
I agree.
maybe alternative is to have a couple of volunteers, Alan and Fred.
Nice and cool, we've been there.
I know I can't volunteer for it. My suitor doesn't.
If there were a couple of us that went in and did that research in the next couple of days, so that we could come back to Nancy and say, we've satisfied this, we can explain to the commission, or there is a real concern and a violation, and please, have a special meeting and issue a cease and desist or something. I mean, we need to either put a temporary hold on it or do something like that.
Who is willing to go through all these piles of paper in the next few days? Who's got the time? Willing to do it at the end of the week? John?
Yes, I will.
You will? Fred?
I would be glad to work on it tomorrow. I'm gone Thursday, so.
Okay.
And for.
Anybody else want to get
time?
Kathy?
I'm not available.
Not available. Okay, well, Alan?
Cannot have three.
Alan's not answering.
Can't have three. That's right, can't have a meeting. So we're gonna have John and Fred.
And then after that, John and Alan.
John and Alan.
May look at it later, yeah.
But we just need to get it, we need to get this, we need to get all this stuff sorted out. We need to find out the 19th.
Yeah. And I'm happy to have Matt chat with you about the start there.
Can I address the septic system issue that was brought up by Mr. Reidy? As far as the difference between Torrington area's regulations and the state regulations?
Sure.
The fact of the matter is that Torrington area enforces the state regulations.
Correct.
So there is no discrepancy. Kathy reviewed the plans, issued a permit, and it was done. In fact, she did review that plan with Matt Pollard, who is the state representative for the health department.
And she's aware that that's a stream or a ditch. Doesn't make any difference, I guess.
Doesn't make a difference.
It's an open water course here.
What kind of septic system was there originally?
We don't know. There was an old metal tank, I believe, and we don't know. The guys that came out to clean the tank ran a snake about 3 feet and it stopped. So we don't know what was there, but obviously by putting a drainage system in, well, any repair is a drainage system. Yeah. Any septic system. No, but a septic system that's what it's called.
Okay.
Okay, I don't have much time, but a little time, yeah.
Okay, so,
It won't take us more than that.
so you're doing that tomorrow, then, right?
Yes.
Okay, Fred, the resolution is Fred and John are going to examine all this paper and report back to the commission. What we should be doing.
By the end of the week.
Wow, yeah, by the end of the week.
Thanks,
Do you want this, Fred?
Mr.
Mr. Chairman, we want to do this.
Is this something we have already? Is this?
I believe you have
I
it.
think it's familiar to me.
I believe you have it, but
We also,
Give it to John, because he doesn't, everything we have, we're going to have to.
some guidelines, in case there's some.
Okay.
Just approved guidelines, if there's some confusion that we need to call Mark for some clarification, or Mr. Reidy, that
Yes.
we can talk to them.
You can talk to Mark, you can talk to Mr. Reidy, Mr. Reidy can talk to Mary Silk if you want.
Yeah.
And certainly, please talk to Matt Kiefer, because I think that's really key to how this happened.
Michael,
Yes, Danella.
I just need some clarification on which commission is protecting the lake. So the one thing we haven't talked about is the cutting of the trees presumably is going to have a negative impact on the lake. So if that's true, then it would be imperative that you would come back to some commission to get approval before doing something that would have a negative impact on the lake.
George, address that.
I don't understand how the removal of the trees has a negative impact on the lake.
Well, that's what I'd like to understand. I thought that was part of Mary Silk's presentation.
I think in light of the soil and erosion control, probably that list is so much build. And as Peter talked about the small rain garden, you know, for the large area and the amount of disturbance and things like that.
We
I mean,
went,
isn't there a regulation about that? You can't disturb so many square feet within,
500 square feet within 75 feet of the lake.
so would have this come under that?
and
It's down at
the fact of the matter is that rain garden, which I reiterated during the site plan application, handled, I believe, almost a full volume of a 10-year storm for what was going into it. And the secondary is these trees that were there were planted in double rows, so the inside of all those trees was dead wood. So it wasn't absorbing water, wasn't doing anything. And they're not, once those were removed and that seeded with grass, that's going to provide you a better erosion prevention going into the lake than the dead dirt that is underneath the trees because there's no tree, no sun getting in there. So with the trees that were there, if water was running down, that would carry sediment into the lake. Where with the grass cover, it's not going to.
I haven't got this figure.
We have one at a time.
So you
One at a time talking, please. I don't even have a gavel, I can't reach it. Thank you. One at a time talking, and let's try to wrap this up, please.
So in my opinion, I believe that a grass cover in that area would be a better erosion control method than the trees that were there. But
All right. But you're willing to put, you're going to put some trees in there.
we're going to get a single roll.
Right.
So
So,
before the ones, trees are not the best for stopping water
Right.
sedimentation.
Yeah. When you're looking at drainage calculations, I have discussion with engineers all the time. A lot of towns think that when you remove trees off an area, you're going to get more runoff because the trees absorb the water. But in actuality, what the trees are doing is when it rains, the water that falls on the leaves or needles of the tree are retained by surface tension until they evaporate. That's the difference.
Right.
Right. It's not the absorption through the ground of the water.
But it's the same
But the
thing.
quality of the tree.
Prevents a lot of runoff because the surface tension holds a lot of that water. Right?
You evaporate water goes off.
So when it's raining very hard where the trees aren't, when the trees are, it's allows it to be trapped by the tree. Right?
all right, so we have a sort of a plan of John and Fred going to review this volume of information. They're going to talk to Mark, they're going to talk to Matt, they're going to talk to Mr. Reidy, Mary, and try to come back to us and get some clarity on some of these issues. And then, based on that, we'll have a discussion, Nancy and I will have a discussion, and to decide whether or not more action is needed.
Question?
Yes,
Are we doing the as-built on the foundation now? Will we see that sometime soon?
do you think if we review all of this, we still need an as-built on the foundation?
We'll have to wait till Friday.
Yeah, well, that may be one of the, I mean, I think maybe peer review might have some recommendations of what we need to give us some guidance. But that would be one of the things. Another thing that, because that would answer some of the questions authoritatively about the bill code and that. Maybe question of the financial plan or something. There's lots of things, but I think you should review it and give your recommendations to us.
Okay, can we?
So can we come by and take a look at the site?
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
If you want to set time.
Mary and Mr. Reidy, really quickly, because I've got to finish up this meeting.
I have a question about the impervious surface calculation.
Hold on, get out on the microphone very quickly, because we have other things we have to do.
Since the deed to the property and the previous revision plan said the property was 1.6 acres, and that's what the deed said it was, the site plan says 1.1 acres, which
What was used for the impervious surface
Getting this
calculation, the
The
1.6?
A2 survey, the A2 survey that was presented to us.
Well, let's answer, that's a question that needs to be answered. Well, let's please just answer it. That's one of the things. Which survey, okay, we'll look, that will be part of the report for Fred and John to get back to us. Answer that very specific question. Which survey were the calculations based on? Mr. Reidy?
Yes. I couldn't
Please no more information.
well, this is from my arborist.
Oh, okay.
Went out and looked, all he could look at was the branches, because that's all that was left. And he said they were very healthy, no sign of disease. And then as I mentioned earlier, they had to take down the trees in order to do their site things. If you look at the site, they've got a galley there within, sitting under a tree. You know, they had to take them down.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I think in the future this commission is going to have people go out and look at these things in the field. Because that, I think, would become apparent.
And to help Mr. Higgins, as I mentioned, there are 3 deeds here involved and 2 boundary agreements. There's a sale from Glascarin to Nutshell, who is Dean, and then there's a quick clean from Dean to his wife, and then a sale from Margaret to the buyers.
Okay.
There are 2 boundary line agreements. I have them both here, copies. The 3 warranty deeds. The warranty deed prepared by Matt Hackle-Salatro, the last one from Margaret to the buyers, that was executed September 17th after the approval received, references these 2 boundary agreements. So there are no further agreements. As at the time that the property was sold, as of this past September, that bump out is the property line. And so I'll give you, I have copies of the 3 warranty deeds. I have copies of the 2 boundary agreements. You'll see that that is the existing thing. That's what's on the record.
Give that to Mr. Do you have one set of those? Just give them to Mr. Higgins. Give them to Mr. Higgins. But that's, and he's going to talk to Mr. Kiefer about that, but that's really central to where is the boundary. I asked Mr. Salasalato if there was additional things in the land records. He wasn't sure, so he may have other things.
And now I also want to...
Mr. Reidy?
Okay, just 2 other things, just quick.
Very quickly, sir.
It's in the past building minutes, they say that a nonconformity is not just for vertical for part of it, it's the whole building. That you can't just say, well, this part doesn't have a second floor, and so therefore we're okay. And when you look at how close it is, it's a lot closer than 70 feet. It's 40-something feet from the edge of that building to where that stream is. It's a lot closer, and when you measure what they did with the building went forward. It went forward and it went backward. So I don't know how they're able to show, but if you measure from the existing pins, property pins, it definitely shows the building going forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll look into it and report back to the commission.
And I leave on the desk my request for a cancellation of the permit and then certainly a cease and desist on the second floor.
Well, one of the recommendations will come, hopefully, we're going to ask them to consider that too as part of their report back to us. Thank you. Right.
Like, I support your idea of the site visits. I think that's really important. And I think there's also an opportunity for us to put together a list of the questions that we want to ask in every site plan review, and that list can be given to people before they put their material together.
Right, we can learn from this. All right. Okay. Where are we now? Okay. Number 10, I want to review and approve the invoice from Attorney Andrus in the amount of $1,347.50. Motion to approve? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. And last but not least, kitty keepers. We're talking about us wandering through the streets. But not cutting down any trees.
Right, exactly.
Just for the record, I'm Kate Keeper, and I am vice chairman of a new commission called Pathways Committee. And we have a meeting for, I think, 4 meetings total. And when I decided to run this department, I asked citizens what interests and concerns were. And people talked about pathways. A favorite quote that I got from a weekender was that Lakeville and Salisbury remind me of Los Angeles because this is just like the Los Angeles around here. Everybody drives to their workout. He's saying people can't step out of their doors and go anywhere. They have to climb in their car and go someplace to walk or exercise. I do have stuff here to hand out, but I hesitate to do it. So I'm telling you. I'm hoping it's going to be very that's going to be a popular thing. So what I'm going to start with is minutes from our third meeting where we honored your presence, where you said, read the planning and zoning documentation to see what you all had in your long-term plans and long-term ideas about people walking in the town. And so we looked at the POCD, and you all do encourage walkways, sidewalks in all areas, secondary walkways. You want people to be able to move around, not just in cars, but also on foot, bicycles, strollers, wheelchairs, scooters, motorized things on sidewalks is kind of iffy sometimes.
It's not motorized.
All right, so then a scooter. Well, scooters for sure. And also thinking about pathways, we prioritized what we think are the most important areas. We sort of have our own language. We have what we call the connector, which is something that goes between Lakeville and Salisbury. Classic sidewalks as per DOT regulations. There's my particular creation, which is called the Triangle with Horns, and that's 4441 Lower Cobble with the horns going up to the trailheads where the Appalachian Trail intersects. The Appalachian Trail is very supportive of us making it safer for trail people to walk into town, because we do have some issues with narrowness, and people will come down with dogs and all kinds of stuff. Then the next area that sort of came up in discussion was getting people safely around Lakeville Lake or Lake Renassi Pond. That will pick up Hotchkiss people and interlaking people. And then the last thing, people, it sort of surprised me, but when I was talking to people, was it 2 summers ago, they said Lime Rock wants their sidewalks back because that's where kids can play and that's where people can walk without being on the busy roads. My agenda item says that I'm supposed to be talking about pedestrian access between Salisbury and Lakeville. I had, yes, I remember the last item on the agenda. We discussed it in our committee. We've also talked to the school, and as you know, the school has to evacuate and go to the new firehouse. That's their emergency evacuation. So we've got Lisa Carter and Claude Rollo, chairperson of the Board of Ed, has written us a letter supporting this. And I'm going to give it all to Nancy tomorrow, and then she can distribute it to you. I don't want to give you another piece of paper now. Just really don't. But I have lots of copies, so I got to give somebody. And I also have copies of our minutes.
No, you couldn't give them, because otherwise what Nancy has to do is mail them to everyone.
Yeah, and I would like to have them because
Go ahead.
I'm fried, but I'll be able to write up your report.
We met last night, and I didn't even give these to Curtis and Jim. So you guys are ahead of Curtis and Jim.
One section,
all right.
That's what I was saying.
I don't know that I have enough, because I was trying to learn how to use the copy machine. I have to keep one so I can make copies for Jim and Curtis. And then these are our minutes, which I can also pass out if you want. Why not? What the heck?
Well, they were in
But I guess the question I'd like to ask is, what can we do?
These were in the packet.
We don't need them. These are in the packet.
I sent them the whole email.
Okay. Because, I guess I don't exactly know how to progress. I don't know how to do this. We think that the way to begin, we have on our committee, Pat Hackett, who's an engineer, and Chris Williams, who works for the state, me, Natalia Smirnov, who's a wonderful new resident, and Frank Shinneman, who lives on Salmon Hill. So we're all very, very active and walking, but we don't really know how to work our way through the permitting process and how we have to present this in a very sort of efficient and logical way for the community and for funding. We're not there yet, but we have got sort of prioritized what we would like to do. So I'm going to ask for guidance from any of you all who know what to do.
Go to the selectmen.
Good, yeah. That's the next thing. Yeah, that's the next thing. Because I was talking with Chris about...
Are any of your plans, as you can see, of which you'd like to do in conflict with any of our zoning regulations? Because,
No.
Because recently we made changes like to accommodate the firehouse. We rezoned that area to, so if there's not, so that's would be one, there were things we could do in that regard to facilitate. But you're saying there's nothing that...
Not that I know of, but Mike, you're the reader of the zoning regs. Can you think, you don't have to say yes or no now.
You're in a situation where if I'm understanding what all of that, I hate reading chains of email, by the way, just so you know. But you're looking at DOT, you're looking at right-of-ways. Now, you've got a real complicated thing because the area, a lot of that area is private residential property.
Right, but the right-of-way is wires. Yeah,
right-of-ways, and the DOT is not always the easiest thing to work with.
Well, we had maps. I got maps from that poor Matt Kiefer who came up several times this evening. The road maps, the 34 road maps of everywhere around here, so we know where the right-of-ways, how wide the right-of-ways are on these state highways, and we also know where the center pins are. And some of us have even been going out looking for the stone markers. So we're trying to establish where the right-of-ways are. And once we decide which side of the road to go on, either to get children down to the firehouse or to get people who can walk from Salisbury to Lakeville on the edge of the road, I'm thinking we're going to end up on the side across from Alfred Nemroff because he's got 2 elm watch trees on his side, and those trees are very important to not harm. But on the other side, we may end up, in other words, we don't know.
On the other side right there, you
We're
got
not
some
gonna be at
critical
grade.
banks and stuff too. Those.
We're not going to be in grade all the way.
No.
I remember I lived up in the Minuteman National Forest where there's lots of bike trails and bike paths getting people through the old battlefields. And those beautiful paths are all handicap accessible, and they are not necessarily a grade. So that's not a requirement.
Grade is not a requirement.
Not a requirement for sidewalks. Chris Williams, where's my notes in here, working for the state, has a great idea about getting a bike. This is, again, you guys have it, but it says here this is Chris Williams, suggested asking DOT for a wide bike lane as an alternative to some sidewalks for around the lake. Because many people are very sad that they can't walk easily around the lake, but there might be a way to get the state just to, at grade, widen the road to allow a bike lane, which would give us pedestrian access around the lake. So it's just, it's just an idea. But Chris, it was Chris's idea because it saves a lot of money because it's just a widening the road a little bit.
All of these ideas conform with our latest POCD.
Correct.
Okay.
But I would talk to Curtis because he's great at getting help from the state and also getting funding. And maybe Jocelyn Ayers too.
Well, Jocelyn, I'm going to talk with this week. She and I are playing phone.
It's certainly one of the things, if you start writing applications for grants, one of the things is certainly letters of support from, town commission, like the planning commission.
Okay.
It's relatively easy to say that this conforms to the POCD, and so we could certainly give you that kind of support.
Okay.
If it's don't need to change zoning, we don't need to make changes, we certainly can support it as part of the POCD. And certainly, take a vote and endorse it or whatever.
Well,
which what funders love. They love to have a whole bunch of letters from different agencies. The more, the better.
Okay. All right. Well, then I have one last.
Curtis is good. He's good.
Yeah. Well, we're going to present. Literally, we met last night, and people gave me various things. This is another very interesting thing. This is Connecticut Department of Transportation policy statement, and this is sort of serious encouragement of developing walking alternative means of transportation to fossil fuels. So it's basically a policy statement encouraging us all to walk more, ride more, and not drive as much. So we're sort of doing this at the right time, I think. And I think we all know, unless you have questions.
This topic is under discussion. I heard a lot about it on NPR in New York City recently because they have extended, bike paths around the city and there's a big problem with danger now. So they're talking about how to make the areas safer. If you're talking about some of the state highways through here and the trucks that are coming through it.
Well, Chris says that you can force traffic to slow down with optical illusions, basically, making the road appear to be, well, that's what they're going to be doing.
Police car.
Yeah, police car, we're not South Dakota yet, I mean, we don't want to be South
Just buying
Dakota.
old ones.
But certainly, there's a lot of work being done like this at the moment in New York City. And, it's the same thing, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, excuse the pun, of finding out what they have learned and what they're trying to do with this so that it's pedestrian and bike friendly. And the other thing is that in many different rooms in the last couple of months, including the economic group, that private, meeting with Lakeville people on the weekend, I think the more we think about Lakeville and the vitality that we're looking for in that town, that the walking is such a challenge.
Well, walking would be great.
That I think it needs a proper planner to come in and look at this in terms of, I don't see how...
That's Lakeville, that's not the connector between.
Correct.
Yeah.
But that's a pedestrian through
Because
Lakeville,
Lakeville
which
is
is not
not
on your list of priorities.
Well, no, Lakeville is not on our list of priorities. We're trying to get from Lakeville to Salisbury.
Can we add it?
Wait.
Can we add it as the village of Lakeville, which needs a lot of help with pedestrian
I asked my
access?
commission, and it would go, it would probably end up back to Lime Rock, because we're trying
That's
to...
okay. I'm just saying it needs to be on the list, please.
We have plenty of walking trails in Amesville.
Yeah, but we also have sidewalks already in Lakeville. And one thing you're asking us to bring them all to code, that would be very expensive, so...
I'm just talking safety.
For the connector thing, do you know when you go from Winston, or when you go from Torrington up to Winston by the motor vehicle, that trail that they built there, you might want to talk to those people, because that's it, that runs right with the road.
Yeah, well,
But it's
Runs along the Still River, right? Along the road in the Still River.
It goes almost to the motor vehicle and comes close to Torrington.
That's in Winston, though. It starts in Winston.
No, it's in a couple of towns.
Okay, but it starts in...
It goes down Instead, down the Still River to Torrington, follows that riparian corridor.
Okay.
Very interesting.
It's really interesting because it's right there with the road and it's very nice and I see a lot.
There's another really neat one over in Meriden, Quinnipiac Gorge Trails. It's some very interesting trails that connect.
Well, we have so many resources. Frank Inman has just got an enormous list, and I'll sort of put together and give it to someone, and then you can...
Certainly, this commission certainly can give you that kind of support in terms of endorsement, and who knows down the road, there may be other things you can help you with. But Curtis really knows what he did.
Oh, he's next on our list. I'm here from an enthusiast in election, so...
Good.
All right.
Excellent.
Good luck. Well, I know, that's it.
It's
Good
great.
luck and Godspeed. I always said when we drove out of the driveway, right when you get work. I don't think it's quite that way. You're right there, so.
It's a great initiative.
Okay, I'm going to entertain, it's 9 o'clock. Motion to adjourn, if you accept.
I'm
All right, you can adjourn.
There's a yes, second.
There's a second, good.